Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we are looking at Vineyard. This is a potion cost victory card from Alchemy, and it says plus 1 point per 3 action cards you have, round down. Vineyard is a very strong alternate VP card. It's often very powerful. In fact, I'd say it's one of the stronger victory cards in the entirety of all of Dominion. Usually beats out Province and can definitely compete against colonies as well. Vineyard scales very quickly. So if you compare it to something like, say, Gardens, where you have to gain 10 cards to bump them up, Vineyard at minimum only really needs 3 cards. Now, yes, they do have to be action cards, but action cards tend to be the strongest cards that are available in the game. You usually want to add as many of them as you can to your deck anyway, so Vineyard is sort of promoting the powerful strategies that are usually the best thing to do. Vineyard is very cheap. It actually doesn't cost you any coins at all to buy one. Now, yes, it does cost potion. I guess you could argue that in itself makes it quite expensive, but you do not need any money at all to actually buy a Vineyard. So when do you not get Vineyard? So there are 2 situations that I tend to think of when I think of boards that don't want Vineyard. One of them is that you can't really gain enough action cards. For example, you're only limited to 1 per turn. So although Vineyard scales quickly, 1 action card per turn is actually not good enough to buff them up to any reasonable amount. And usually if you're only gaining 1 action per turn, that means you're actually only gaining 1 card at all per turn, and that means that you have to take time out to buy the potion as well. And basically that's just a huge cost when you have such limited ability to build as well. So the second way is that your deck just can't actually support having a lot of action cards in it. So this might mean that, for example, every action card is terminal, or at least the village support is very low, and there are no other non-terminal actions. If you just can't build a functional deck out of action cards, then you just sort of can't really go for Vineyard. In either of these cases, I would say that you would ignore Vineyard entirely, and in fact, in general, I would say that Vineyard is a card that tends to be all or nothing, in that it's either a Vineyard deck and you are going to have very powerful Vineyards, or you just ignore Vineyard entirely and it doesn't work. You don't tend to get a middle ground that often, I would say. So what Vineyard does is that it rewards building. So typically, you're looking to build strong, powerful decks with lots of action cards. You want to draw your entire deck, and you want to gain many cards per turn so that you can just keep making it much stronger more rapidly. If this is available to you to do in the game, then this is usually the strongest thing that you can do. So Vineyard rewards building this type of powerful deck by giving you a lot of points if you go for that. The more you build, the more points that your Vineyards are worth, in addition to the fact that you have a strong deck, right? It's the strong deck on its own is already very powerful, but Vineyard is throwing points at you for doing that. What's important with these sort of powerful decks that build a lot is that they continue to get stronger at a faster pace as you continue to build, and this means that your ability to buff up the value of Vineyards just gets better and better over time. And it very quickly just starts to explode to ridiculous values. I have actually seen a game with Vineyard where the Vineyards were worth 11 points each at the end, which is crazy. You don't necessarily get Vineyards up to that much. In fact, you don't even necessarily get the Vineyards up to Province worth of points, but it is reasonably common. But what really is powerful with Vineyard is that you get a lot of flexibility with the type of deck that you are trying to build. So the decks that are good for Vineyard tend to have a lot of potential to gain a lot of cards per turn. And that means that those decks usually have very good pile control. Now, what this means, pile control is that the game ends when any 3 piles empty. So if you have the ability to just gain a lot of cards, you sort of get to set the pace for the game, because one of the end game conditions you can just activate whenever you want. And when you combine that with Vineyard's fast scaling, You, as the Vineyard player, basically get to choose whether you want the game to go long or whether you want it to go short. So because you can just gain a lot of cards and end it, if you are in the lead early on, you can just rapidly run out the piles and win. And if you've got an opponent that, for example, is not really building engines but trying to go for like a basic money-based deck and they're trying to buy like one province per turn, you can just say to that player, okay, you buy one province per turn and spend forever trying to buy them. I'm just going to keep on building with action cards. I'm not going to touch the provinces. And I'm just going to get vineyards while just building up more and more. And then your vineyards soon start to completely outstrip the provinces. And while the provincing player may have gained the lead early on, you will eventually catch up. And they don't get the ability to end the game while they're in the lead because all they can really do is just buy provinces. Like they cannot just decide to just end piles, right? They don't have any pile control. So as a Vineyard player, you basically get to make the game length work for you, right? You get to decide, basically. And that's a very strong position to be in Dominion. Now, Vineyard, while it doesn't cost any coins, yes, it does cost a potion as well. And what this means is that you can't gain Vineyard through normal means. In fact, because it's a victory card, a lot of the other ways to try and gain potion cards without buying a potion, like Lurker and so on, they don't work. Victory cards are usually very restricted in what sort of things are allowed to gain them. Oftentimes, you simply just have to buy them. And because Vineyard costs potion, you basically have no choice other than the fact that you must buy it. And that means you need to gain a potion, you need to draw it before you're allowed to buy it. Now, because it doesn't actually cost you any coins, that means if you have excess buys per turn that are going to waste, you can probably gain a potion and then you can use those buys to just pick up vineyards. You don't need to add any extra economy to buy more cards because Vineyard doesn't cost you any coins. Vineyard, I would say, is the potion cost card that most often justifies getting more than one potion. For most of the potion cost cards, you only ever really want the one potion, and it's quite rare to ever get more than one. But for Vineyard, gaining at least a second potion, I would say is reasonably common, because when Vineyard gets really good, there is just this mad scramble at some point to suddenly start gaining as many vineyards as you can, and you can get a second potion and buy more per turn. Winning the Vineyard split can become very important. So when do you start going for Vineyard? Because the key thing here is that because you can't gain Vineyard under normal means, you have to go out of your way to get this potion to start getting them. And because they're so strong, there's this idea of, how soon do I want to start getting Vineyards just to make sure that I get enough of them? And I would say that with Vineyard, you really need to prioritize building a strong engine first. If you just try and immediately go for potion on your opening turn, you will fall behind to a player who actually gets their engine under control first. So this is because strong engines get better with every passing turn. As they build more, their output per turn is also expected to go up as well. They get to just gain more cards per turn the longer they go on. So there is that sort of mixture between, how much do I build versus when do I give up building more temporarily in order to start going for vineyards. And I would say that I usually, as soon as my deck is under control and I am able to gain multiple action cards per turn, even if I had a potion and was buying a vineyard, then that is the time that I would get it. So as soon as possible after I can be in a situation where I would be able to buy a vineyard and still gain 2 action cards per turn. So bear in mind that generally applicable advice on this sort of thing is very difficult because every board is different. The correct deck to build changes with everything that you do. But what's nice about this particular advice, I guess, is that it means that you can support adding in the potion and the vineyard. You want to wait until your deck is able to support adding all of these dead stock cards into your deck, but you also need to be able to keep building. So if you need to add a village and a smithy every turn or whatever, then you can start adding in vineyards as well, and the village, the smithy help you draw those cards and support your deck and keep drawing your deck despite adding all of these stock cards into it. Bear in mind that it will take multiple turns to gain vineyards. The potion restriction makes gaining them pretty slow, and that's why you kind of need to get a start on it before it's too late. So just a couple of types of cards that we're going to go over now that are pretty important to note whenever Vineyard is around. So number 1 are looters. Cultist, Marauder, and Death card from the Dark Ages expansion. These are what are called looter cards, and whenever one of them is present, this ruins pile gets added to the kingdom. It doesn't matter whether you buy the looter cards or not, the ruins are just there. Ruins is a stack of 0 cost action cards, and the size of the pile is the same as the curse pile, so it goes up the more players you have. Now, 0 cost action cards, this makes it very easy and cheap to power up vineyards. Now, yes, they are not very good action cards. 4 out of 5 of the types of ruin are all terminal as well, so it doesn't mean that you can support a deck that is rammed full of ruins, but it's so easy if you've got a lot of buys to just throw a load of them into your deck, and hey, ruined markets, one of the ruins, even give you more buys in order to buy more ruins with it. Cultist and Marauder, 2 of the looters, those are attacks, and they try and give ruins to your opponent. It can usually be very bad to actually add Cultists and Marauders to your deck when Vineyards is around, because while junking attacks are usually very strong, junking ruins is basically giving your opponent points when Vineyard is on the table. And, Cultist is one of the strongest cards in the game, but it can lose pretty hard when Vineyard is around. It's one of the biggest anti-synergies with Cultist. Don't buy it when Vineyard is around, because you will just give your opponent so many points very, very easily. In that case, maybe the fact that your opponent doesn't have a functional deck doesn't really matter, because all they need to do is draw a potion to buy a Vineyard, and they've already just got a huge bunch of points. In addition to that, Death card, yes, when you play it, it trashes action cards, so maybe you don't want to be playing Death card when Vineyard is around, but when you gain it, it comes with 2 extra ruins. That means just gaining this 1 4-cost action card gets you 3 action cards for 1 gain. That will immediately bump all of your Vineyards up by 1 point, so you can, quite late in the game, just suddenly amass a huge amount of points when Death card is around. Horses. These are a card in Menagerie, and a whole load of cards in Menagerie give you horses. So horses is a non-supply pile of action cards, but it's a very big supply pile. There's 30 horses in it. In addition to that, all of the horses are one-shot laboratories, so it's very easy to support a deck with a lot of horses in it. And that means that you get to just... Because horses is a non-supply pile, even if it empties, it doesn't count towards 3-piling. So there's just a load of these actions that you can now add to just add into your deck to buff up the power of Vineyards while letting the game keep going on long. So there's a lot of room to gain all these action cards that are easy to support in your deck. Now, of course, horses are a one-shot. You return them back to the horse pile when you play them. So, if you're playing a lot of horses, then you just keep losing these actions from your deck. But what's key with horses is that many of the cards that gain you horses are very good at getting you those horses back again at the end of your turn. And it's very easy to draw your deck and support a lot of horses. And so that means that all of the horses are sitting in your deck between turns. And that's really important, because that is the point at where the scoring of Vineyard matters. It doesn't matter if you play 10 horses on 1 turn and lose a load of points from your Vineyards. If you can get all of those 10 horses back again between turns, then you've still got all of the points from Vineyard, because you never accidentally end your turn in the middle of it, right? So livery, paddock, and supplies are 3 that I just want to call out for being quite nice with Vineyards. These are pretty good horse gainers. So livery, sometimes it gets to go bonkers, and you always know those games because you can just gain the entire horse pile in 1 turn. That's can be very good. So when it is, it's just insane for Vineyards. Paddock, there's a lot of cards that gain you 2 horses, but Paddock is interesting because it is potentially non-terminal and even a village, unlike the others, and it gives you money as well. So very easy to just amass a lot of horses by just going for a lot of paddocks. Supplies is interesting. Supplies is not an action card in and of itself. It's a treasure, so you might think that's quite bad for Vineyard. But supplies, when you play it, gives you a horse. So for all the purposes of calculating how many action cards you will have, supplies technically counts as 1 action, as long as when you buy a supplies you get to play it at least once. You should hopefully be able to play that supplies every turn, and so the net result is that every turn you will have had that 1 horse to match each supplies. So it's an extra action, and it's giving you horses which you can help you draw your deck, so it's very easy to fit a load of supplies in your deck, and they're also really cheap. They only cost 2. So it's a very powerful horse gainer, and it's nice for cards like Vineyard as well. There are others, by the way, like Cavalry, for example. I'm not going to exhaustively list all of them, but just note horses, they're a big deal for Vineyards. Last thing that I wanted to call out are ways, also from the Menagerie expansion. So these are important because some of them make it very easy to manage a deck filled with action cards. Now, they're all different, and some of them aren't. Some ways will not help you at all when in terms of like shoving a load of action cards in your deck, but some of them do. So just here are some examples, and this is not exhaustive. So Way of the Ox turns any action card into a village. So that means stuff like Moat. These are cheap non-terminal draw. You really normally cannot throw a load of moats into your deck. But if you have Way of the Ox, now every moat pair is essentially like those moats were do-nothing cantrips, right? You just cycled past them and you've ended up again with your action remaining. So you can just throw, if you've got the ability to do it, just throw as many moats as you need to into your deck, and you can support them. That's great for stuff like Vineyard. Way of the Pig is more direct. It literally turns each moat into a do-nothing cantrip. But then you have stuff like Way of the Turtle, and as long as you can spend an action, what you can do is you can play some action card once and turtle it away, and then essentially keep it in limbo for the rest of the game. Now, it does mean every turn you have to choose to set it aside again, which is a bit tedious, but it does allow you to slowly amass action cards without them taking space in your deck, and that means that you can add stock cards and terminal actions, and basically still have them contribute towards Vineyard. It's like exiling them, but not really. Anyway, that's sort of all I really wanted to say about Vineyard, but the general key point is that Vineyard, usually very strong any time that you can go for it, and you can build a strong deck. Vineyard is, most of the time, I would say, very good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client. We are going to generate some random kingdoms that have Vineyard in it, and we're going to assess what sort of impact Vineyard has on that kingdom. So what's key here? I can see chapel, but I can't see any village. So this is really important because there is no way to really deal with a deck that has a lot of action cards in it. It does have possession, but again, there is no village, so it's not even very good necessarily. Militia is probably quite strong. Sea Hag probably not, because there's chapel, so I think you want to trash down with chapel. You probably want to artisan a bunch of laboratories, and then maybe you never bother with Vineyard, you would just artisan duchies. I mean, given there's Pearl Diver and Lab, these are the only 2 non-terminal actions, and you can't get that many. You can probably get to the stage where Vineyard is worth more, but the problem is that you have to use your buy, right? You cannot gain Vineyards. You have to buy it, and there's nothing that gives you plus buy. There are no extra gains on this board except artisan, and it is only a gain. There's no plus buy. So this is not a Vineyard deck, right? You can't build an engine here. You can have a deck that has a lot of laboratories in it, and you can draw fairly well, and it's nice and thin with chapel, but you can't just add a load of action cards in and actually have it be worth going for Vineyard. The only extra gainer can just gain duchies directly, which is just going to be better value if you need to start gaining things for the purposes of extra points. But really, you just want to buy 1 province per turn. So Vineyard has no use on this kingdom. This is not an engine-y board. That's right. This is the whole, you can only gain 1 per turn, and it's not easy to support lots of action cards because there's no village. So it's no good there. Now on this kingdom, we have no village again. There is Lurker, which is a non-terminal way to gain a lot of action cards, so it can gain you apothecaries and so on. There is Moneylender and Lookout for trashing, so we can get rid of estates, we can get rid of coppers. But do we want to? What have we got after that? There is Explorer to gain treasure. There is Treasure Map to gain golds. What? In terms of non-terminal actions, we have Apothecary as a cantrip, we have Pawn, we've got Lurker, we've got Lookout, but the draw here is pretty bad outside of Apothecary. And Apothecary only draws you coppers and potions, which there's nothing like Cellar to make use of that to put other types of card in your hand. So even then, Apothecary is not really that good, is it? Would we rather trash cards with Moneylender? Like, okay, let's imagine that we sort of ignore various types of action card and we are just going for some kind of money sort of strategy. How would we do that? What would be the best way to do it? Like, Explorer sounds nice. Treasure Map seems hard to pair up, to be honest. So I think Treasure Map's pretty bad. There is an extra buy with Pawn, but I don't like it with Vineyard. I don't like it in this deck. Sorry, Pawn is a nice card normally with Vineyard. What am I talking about? I'm not really sure what's good here. I think like basic money strategies don't feel very good, but at the same time, like I kind of want Apothecary, and I think I would use Potion instead of going for Lurker, because I don't really want Lurker in my deck. Like, Lurker's not very good here. So I probably buy a Potion and get Apothecaries. And that means that technically I could probably get Vineyards if I ever wanted to, and they might be worth something, but like you would only do that instead of something like Estate. Like, would I even have 9 action cards in this deck? Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to have Apothecary. I might be able to get away with it in Explorer, because Apothecary might let me make it easier to match up Explorer with Provinces, because it leaves them both on top of the deck while it pulls all the coppers out of the way. Maybe? See, even Artisan doesn't feel very good here. It can get you duchies, but Philosopher's Stone feels very poor indeed. So I think this is like Apothecary and money, and I probably get an Explorer, and I ignore everything else. So Vineyard will only sort of be gained by consequence of the fact that I have a single potion anyway, and I missed getting something better, and it's really late in the game, and Vineyard is worth some amount of points. If it's worth like 2 points, because I have like 6 action cards, and it's better than Estate, but that, it's really no value here. So this is not a good Vineyard board, just the wrong type of deck for it, I think. It's no card draw is the problem there. Here, what do we have? So, are there really no village again? Well, there is Golem. Golem is technically a village. It needs a lot of non-terminals in your deck to do well, and the problem is the only non-terminal is Harbinger and Ironworks. Well, Ironworks lets you get a lot of Harbingers, but I really don't like the sound of that. Golem here feels bad. Or is it bad? Actually, maybe it's not bad. But building a strong engine feels bad. Like, Golem is the only village, when the only way to not have Golem end your turn is having a lot of Harbingers in your deck, does not feel like a very efficient build to me. Now, Golems are safe from Swindlers, but Swindlers can turn your Harbingers into Silvers, and then your Golem kind of stinks. So, what do you do here? Ghost Ship sounds like it might be very powerful. Technically, you might be able to help set up your opponent's Golems with Ghost Ship. Does Ghost Ship get in the way of Swindler? Swindler feels strong here. I think Swindler is capable of stopping you from doing anything relevant. So I open Swindler and Silver. Maybe I don't bother with Militia because I like this Ghost Ship. And I kind of want Ghost Ships. Maybe I have a single Witch. But I kind of just want to be playing Ghost Ship a lot with money and Swindler, which feels rubbish. So again, there's no real engine here, and that means we can't go for Vineyard. So just rolling boards with no villages is very sad. But that's how this is going. So here, at last, I can see that we have a village. We have Bazaar. We have Steward for trashing, which is pretty good. Technically, there's Transmute, but lol. Transmute. There is Militia, there is Witch, there is Bazaar, there is Market, there is Outpost, there is Library. Okay, so we have a reasonable engine here. Bazaar and Market are very nice cards. Market gives it a whole load of extra buys, which is really nice for like getting some potions. Now we do have to buy every card we want to gain. The only way to gain extra cards is by buying them, but we have Market. And we have Outpost as well to give us extra turns. So what we can do is we can open with Steward, and Militia doesn't feel worth it in the face of Steward because it doesn't matter if you Militia someone when they have Steward in hand. So I'm probably going to open Steward and Silver, and I'm going to just expect that it's going to take me a little while to hit 5, but I don't think I'm in any rush, and I want to start getting Bazaars. And then I will get a Witch, and I might as well Witch my opponent. Maybe it doesn't matter which. Maybe Witch is not important. If my opponent's got their deck under control, then I don't think I can give curses in a way that like stops my opponent drawing their deck. Like Steward is fine. They will soon be able to pick up multiple Stewards with Market because it's quite cheap. So I think, Steward for draw, Market, Bazaar, and Outpost, and we're going to get a good engine going on. Now at that point Markets and Bazaars will be fairly low, or probably empty. I imagine these two piles will empty, and then it doesn't seem like it's too difficult to like empty Steward, so I think we shift into Vineyard, and Vineyard's going to be pretty good here. If our opponent doesn't try this strategy, then we get to punish them with Witch as well. We're not bothering with Transmute. Yes, technically it can gain you action cards and stuff, but it gains you Transmute, doesn't it? It doesn't even gain you action cards. So, Transmute's terrible here. But, so this is a good Vineyard game. So, even though the cards are expensive and you can't gain that many, I think that the mixture of Outpost supporting your engine means that you actually have a pretty good engine. And if your opponent isn't doing the engine, they don't get to Outpost. So, you are actually gaining, like, multiple actions for each of your opponent's turns. And, Vineyard can slowly build up to be quite nice. If your opponent just tries to get all 8 provinces, then you actually get to build a strong engine with a lot of like Markets and Bazaars and Stewards, and you will actually do pretty well. So so this is a Vineyard board, and Vineyard's very good. I want to get my deck under control. I want to buy Bazaars, Markets, and then eventually I will shift in. But it's important to note that as soon as I get a potion, I get like an Outpost turn as well, so I get to potentially buy like multiple Vineyards all at once. So the Vineyards will also run fairly quickly, I think. And this game will probably 3-pile on Market, Vineyard and Bazaar, I suspect. And it will happen very suddenly at some point. Like you will slowly be gaining these, and then all of a sudden like the engine's just going to kick off, especially when Outpost is added, which is high priority. There might not be time for stuff like Witch. Anyway, I think that's enough about that. But so that's an example of a strong Vineyard board. Even though the good cards are expensive, it's worth building for it because of Vineyard. And here we have a village with university. We have a lot of non-terminals. This whole top row is all like cantrips, isn't it? So we've got Upgrade for trashing. We've got Poacher, we've got Treasury, we've got Mill, we've got Conspirator. Treasury might make it pretty easy to trigger Conspirator, maybe. There is University to gain a lot of these. So we got Gainer as well. If we want plus buy, we have to use Baron. That's fine, I think. Lighthouse is not really that good. So the big problem is draw here. So everything is mostly a cantrip except Apothecary, but I would rather trash all my coppers with like upgrades. So drawing is hard, but we just want to gain as many cantrips as we can, and then we've got Conspirator to help with that. Poacher isn't so great because we are going to run out of piles, but we have got Treasuries, Mills, Conspirators to play a lot of action cards, and then we got a Baron to try and gain extra buys. And that means that with University, gaining like treasuries, which are going to be important, and all of these as well. So we're going to open Potion, and we are going to open Silver. Maybe we get a Lighthouse instead of a Silver, just because it's an action card, and I don't actually want any Silvers. Maybe I do that. Maybe I get Lighthouse and Potion, because I don't really need the Silver. I'm not that fussed about getting the 5 straight away. The University can get me a bunch of upgrades early on, and then I can just start getting a load of like treasuries with University, and then I can shift into Conspirators, and then I get a Baron, and then I get a Potion, and I start buying Vineyards, and these piles will run, like Mills will run Treasuries will probably run, conspirators will run, it'll all happen fairly quickly, and Vineyard will be really important. It will get you a bunch of points. It might be that you're actually earning so much money and you've got nothing to spend it on that Province is pretty good and the game runs out too fast. So we might get a mixture of like provinces and vineyards, but Vineyard really helps the engine player. I mean, you're definitely doing like the cantrip engine here, but yeah, but if you don't for some reason, then the mill and the vineyard together will just mean so many points for the engine player, right? Every 3 mills that you buy is not just 3 points from the mills, but it's also an extra point from the vineyards, each vineyard that you have. So mills are worth a lot of points here, actually. Mill is very important. I'm just wondering, do you get mills before stuff like treasury? But maybe you need some treasuries first. But mills are very important. So there you go. So on all these kingdoms, it was the ones that had villages that tended to be really good for Vineyard, and that is just because you needed a way to actually support action cards. But generally, as long as you can support all the action cards, like Vineyard is going to be very strong, and that was sort of reflected here. Like Vineyard, generally very good, except in the decks where it's completely useless, basically. So yeah, Vineyard, very strong. I hope this video was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.